The ruthless prairie wind tore at Sophia Dalton's shawl as she stumbled away from Kingfisher's imposing church, the hateful words of Reverend Graves still ringing in her ears. Behind her, the murmurs of the congregation rose like a swarm of angry wasps, each whisper a fresh wound to her already broken heart. It was 1887, and in this unforgiving Oklahoma Territory town, a woman without family or proper standing was but one misstep away from ruin, a lesson Sophia was learning with cruel clarity on this bitter October morning. "And don't you dare show your face in God's house again," the Reverend had declared, his finger pointing toward the door as the entire Sunday congregation watched with a mixture of shock, disgust, and from a precious few pity. Sophia pulled the threadbare wool shawl tighter around her shoulders, her mother's final gift before consumption had claimed her 3 winters past. It was all she had been allowed to take. Her small trunk of belongings, her mother's Bible with pressed wildflowers between its pages, the silver hairbrush that had belonged to her grandmother, all remained locked inside the small room behind the mercantile where she had worked and lived until this morning. Her crime had been simple: rejecting the unwanted advances of Winston Keller, the mercantile owner's son, a man whose wounded pride had transformed quickly to vengeful lies. By sunrise, rumors of her loose morals and sinful behavior had reached every corner of Kingfisher, including the ears of his father, her employer. By church time, she had been branded a fallen woman. Sophia's tears had dried hours ago, leaving her hollow-eyed and numb as she made her way toward the edge of town, unsure where to go but certain she couldn't stay. The 22 years of her life seemed to collapse into the weight of this single day, every step away from the only home she'd known feeling like walking into an abyss. Miss Dalton," the voice came from behind her, deep and unfamiliar. Sophia didn't turn at first, too afraid it might be someone sent to drive her farther away or worse. "Miss Dalton, hold up a moment." She stopped then, her shoulders tense with apprehension as she slowly turned to face the speaker, ready to flee if necessary. The man approaching her sat astride a chestnut stallion, the animal's coat gleaming copper in the autumn sunlight. The rider himself cut an imposing figure, broad-shouldered and tall, even seated in the saddle. His face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out the strong line of his jaw, darkened by several days' worth of stubble. "Nathan Xavier," he introduced himself with a slight tip of his hat. "I couldn't help but witness what happened back there at the church." Sophia's cheeks burned with humiliation. "Come to gawk at the spectacle, Mr. Xavier. I assure you the show is over." His expression softened unexpectedly. "No, madam, quite the contrary." He dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his full height at least 6 feet. She estimated and approached her slowly, as one might a startled deer. "I was passing through when I saw what happened. Those people had no right to treat you that way." Sophia let out a bitter laugh. "Rights have little to do with anything in Kingfisher when reputations are at stake." "Where will you go?" he asked, his hazel eyes studying her with an intensity that made her look away. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely audible over the prairie wind. "I have an aunt in Kansas City, but—" The words trailed off. Aunt Margaret had made it abundantly clear after her mother's funeral that Sophia was an unwelcome burden. Nathan Xavier looked to the horizon, then back at her, a decision visibly forming in his weathered features. "I have a ranch, Miss Dalton, 3 days' ride northwest of here. I need someone to help manage the household, cooking, mending, keeping accounts. The previous woman left to marry a shopkeeper in the nearest town last month." Sophia stiffened. "Mr. Xavier, if you think I'm the sort of woman who would, It's honest work with honest pay, he interrupted firmly. You'd have your own cabin on the property. I'm rarely at the main house anyway, too much work with the cattle. She studied him skeptically. Men didn't offer something for nothing, especially not to women in her position. Why would you help me? You don't know me. A shadow passed over his face, and for a moment she glimpsed something like old pain in his eyes. Let's just say I've seen what small-town cruelty can do. Nobody deserves to be cast out with nothing but the clothes on their back. Nathan glanced at her thin shawl, his expression softening further. You'll want for nothing now if you accept. Sophia hesitated, weighing her options, which were painfully few. The alternative to his offer was the open road with no money, no food, and night approaching, or worse, the type of establishment that would always welcome a desperate woman. I accept, she finally said, her voice stronger than she felt. But I want your word as a gentleman that you'll respect proper boundaries. Something like respect flickered in Nathan's eyes. You have my word, Miss Dalton. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a worn but clean duster coat. The nights get cold. This will serve you better than that shawl until we can get you proper things. As he helped her onto his horse, positioning himself behind her in the saddle, Sophia clutched her shawl with one hand and the horn with the other. She didn't look back at Kingfisher as they rode away, the town that had been her home fading into the endless Oklahoma prairie behind them. It's a 3-day journey, Nathan said as they settled into a steady pace. We'll stop in Caldwell for supplies tomorrow. My ranch, the Broken Arrow, is northwest, just shy of the Kansas line. The sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the vast prairie in brilliant golds and ambers. Despite her circumstances, Sophia couldn't help but notice the beauty of the landscape spreading out before them, so different from the confined world she'd known in Kingfisher. Thank you, she said softly, the words nearly lost in the wind. Nathan simply nodded, his eyes fixed on the trail ahead. Everyone deserves a second chance, Miss Dalton. As they rode into the gathering dusk, Sophia clutched her mother's shawl tighter, its familiar threads the last connection to her former life. She didn't know what awaited her at the Broken Arrow Ranch, but for the first time since being forced from the church steps, she allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. The first night on the trail, they made camp in a small copse of cottonwoods beside a shallow creek. Nathan efficiently set up a small fire and offered Sophia the only bedroll, which she initially refused. You'll take it, he insisted, his tone brooking no argument. I've slept on harder ground with less comfort during cattle drives. Too exhausted to protest further, Sophia accepted, wrapping herself in both the bedroll and Nathan's duster while he settled against his saddle with only a thin blanket, his rifle within easy reach. Are you expecting trouble? She asked, eyeing the weapon nervously. No, he replied simply. But out here, it's better to be prepared than sorry. They shared a simple meal of jerky, hardtack, and coffee. Nathan spoke little, answering her questions about the ranch with brief but informative responses. He had purchased the property 5 years ago after several successful cattle drives, he explained. It wasn't the largest spread in the territory, but it was growing steadily. You have family, Mr. Xavier. Sophia ventured as the fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows across his features. A muscle tightened in his jaw. Not anymore. Something in his tone discouraged further inquiry, and Sophia respected his privacy. After all, she hardly wanted to discuss her own painful history with a virtual stranger. As the night deepened, Nathan took the first watch, insisting she rest. Sophia lay awake for some time, studying his silhouette against the starlit sky. In the space of a single day, her life had been uprooted entirely, placing her fate in the hands of this quiet, serious man she barely knew. The thought should have terrified her, yet something about Nathan Xavier's steady presence calmed her frayed nerves. Eventually, exhaustion overcame her anxiety, and she drifted into a fitful sleep filled with dreams of angry faces and endless roads. When dawn broke, Sophia awakened to find Nathan already tending the horses, a fresh pot of coffee brewing over the rekindled fire. He acknowledged her with a nod, his expression giving away nothing of his thoughts. "We'll reach Caldwell by midday," he informed her, passing her a tin cup of steaming coffee. "You can get whatever you need there." "I have no money," Sophia reminded him, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Consider it an advance on your wages," Nathan replied evenly. "A housekeeper needs proper clothes and personal items." They broke camp efficiently and continued their journey northwestward. As they rode, the landscape gradually changed, the flat prairie giving way to gently rolling hills. Sophia found herself studying her companion's profile when he wasn't looking, noting the way his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, alert for any sign of danger or change. By noon, the small but bustling town of Caldwell came into view. Unlike Kingfisher, which had grown around the church and mercantile, Caldwell had sprung up around the railroad, its main street lined with businesses catering to travelers and cattle drivers. Nathan guided his horse toward a modest but well-maintained hotel near the center of town. "We'll stay here tonight," he announced, dismounting and offering his hand to help Sophia down. "Get some proper rest before the final stretch to the ranch." After securing rooms separate ones, Sophia noted with relief Nathan escorted her to the general store. "Get whatever you need," he instructed, pressing several dollars into her palm. "I'll see to the horses and pick up some ranch supplies." Sophia stood frozen for a moment after he left, overwhelmed by this unexpected kindness. The store owner's wife, a plump, motherly woman named Mrs. Hollister, approached with a welcoming smile. "Can I help you find something, dear? You look like you could use a friendly hand." Something about the woman's genuine warmth broke through Sophia's carefully maintained composure. "I need everything," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm starting over." Understanding dawned in Mrs. Hollister's eyes. "Well then, let's start with the essentials." Over the next hour, Sophia selected practical items: 2 sturdy work dresses, undergarments, a warm nightgown, thick stockings, and a pair of practical boots to replace her town shoes. Mrs. Hollister added a brush, comb, and small mirror, along with soap and a bottle of rose-scented water. "Every woman needs something pretty, even on a ranch," she insisted with a wink. When Nathan returned to collect her, Sophia had spent exactly the amount he'd given her, not a penny more. The restraint seemed to please him, a brief nod acknowledging her practicality. That evening, after the luxury of a proper bath in the hotel, her first real privacy since leaving Kingfisher, Sophia sat on the edge of her bed, running her fingers over her mother's shawl. Despite its threadbare condition, she couldn't bear to replace it with the newer, sturdier one Mrs. Hollister had recommended. A soft knock at her door startled her. Opening it cautiously, she found Nathan standing in the hallway, his hat in his hands, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "I thought you might join me for supper," he said, the invitation sounding stiff and unpracticed. "The hotel dining room is decent enough." Sophia hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Xavier, I'd appreciate that." The dining room was half full when they entered, mostly traveling businessmen and a few local families. Nathan guided her to a table near the back, positioned so he could see the door, a habit Sophia was beginning to realize, born of years living in territory where danger could arrive unexpectedly. Over a simple but satisfying meal of roast beef, potatoes, and apple pie. Sophia found herself studying her benefactor more closely. In the lamplight, she could see that Nathan Xavier was perhaps in his early 30s, his face weathered from years under the sun and wind. His hands were calloused, bearing the marks of hard physical labor, yet he handled his utensils with surprising grace. "You mentioned cattle drives," she ventured, breaking a lengthy silence. "Were you a drover before buying your ranch?" Nathan finished his bite before answering. "Started as one at 17. Worked my way up to trail boss by 25. Did the Kishom Trail run 8 times." Sophia's eyes widened slightly. The Kishom Trail was legendary, a brutal months-long journey driving cattle from Texas to the railheads in Kansas. Men died on those drives, facing everything from river crossings and stampedes to hostile encounters. That must have been difficult work. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "It was, but it was honest. Taught me everything I needed to know about cattle, men, and surviving." "And now you have your own ranch," she prompted. "The Broken Arrow isn't much compared to some spreads," he acknowledged. "About 1,200 acres, 200 head of cattle, small operation, but it's mine. No debts." There was unmistakable pride in those last words, and Sophia found herself respecting this quiet man all the more for it. In a time when many ranchers leveraged themselves to the eyeballs chasing empire dreams, Nathan Xavier had built something sustainable and wholly his own. "What will my duties entail exactly?" she asked, returning to more practical matters. "The main house needs keeping, cleaning, cooking, mending. I have 3 regular hands and sometimes hire seasonal help during calving or roundup. They've been managing their own meals since Mrs. Peterson left, but poorly." A slight grimace suggested the quality of bachelor cooking. "There's also correspondence and accounts to be managed. I understand you worked at a mercantile," Sophia nodded. "For nearly 3 years. Mr. Keller allowed me to help with the ledgers when he discovered I had some education." Nathan looked genuinely interested. "Your parents valued learning. My father was a school teacher before he died," she explained, a familiar ache spreading through her chest at the memory. "Yellow fever took him when I was 12. My mother continued my education as best she could afterward." Something in Nathan's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition perhaps. "Yellow fever took my sister," he said quietly, "and my mother not long after." It was the first personal detail he'd volunteered, and Sophia recognized it as the gesture of trust it was. "I'm sorry for your loss, Mr. Xavier." He nodded once, then changed the subject. "We should leave early tomorrow, still have a good day's ride ahead." That night, lying in the unfamiliar hotel bed, Sophia found her thoughts drifting to Nathan Xavier. He remained largely a mystery, yet there was something fundamentally decent about him, a quality increasingly rare in her experience. Whether this journey would lead to salvation or further heartbreak remained to be seen. But for the first time in days, Sophia felt something besides despair when she thought about her future. The following morning dawned clear and cool, a perfect day for travel. After a hearty breakfast, they set out from Caldwell, Nathan's stallion carrying their supplies while Sophia rode a gentle mare he'd purchased in town. "She's part of your wages, too," he'd explained when Sophia protested the extravagance. "Can't have my housekeeper walking everywhere on a ranch this size." The final day's journey took them through increasingly rugged terrain. The flat plains gave way to rolling hills dotted with stands of oak and cottonwood. Creeks carved their way through the landscape, and in the distance, Sophia could make out the silhouette of low bluffs. As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Nathan pointed ahead to where a thin column of smoke rose against the sky. "Broken Arrow," he said simply. The ranch came into view gradually as they crested a gentle rise. First the outbuildings, a barn, bunkhouse, and corrals, then the main house itself. A solidly built two-story structure of weathered wood with a wide porch wrapping around the front and one side. A windmill turned lazily nearby, and a stream coursed through the property, widening into a small pond near the house. It wasn't grand by any means, but to Sophia's eyes, it looked like a sanctuary after the upheaval of recent days. As they approached, a wiry older man emerged from the barn, raising a hand in greeting. "That's Hank Johnson," Nathan explained. "Foreman. Been with me since I bought the place. The other hands are probably out checking the north pasture." Hank waited for them by the hitching post, his leathery face breaking into a surprised smile when he spotted Sophia. "Well now, boss, didn't expect you back with company. Hank, this is Miss Sophia Dalton. She's taking over as housekeeper." The foreman tipped his hat respectfully. "Madam." That's welcome news indeed. My flapjacks were starting to threaten mutiny among the men. Despite her nervousness, Sophia found herself smiling at the man's easy humor. "I'll do my best to prevent any uprisings, Mr. Johnson. Just Hank, madam. We don't stand on ceremony much out here." Nathan dismounted and helped Sophia from her horse. "Let's get you settled," he said, retrieving her modest bundle of new possessions from the saddlebag. "The housekeeper's cabin is just beyond the kitchen garden." The cabin, while small, was well built and clean, with a bedroom, small sitting area, and a covered porch facing the main house. Simple furnishings, a bed, a chest of drawers, a rocking chair, and a small writing desk were arranged with practical efficiency. "Mrs. Peterson kept it neat," Nathan explained, setting her bundle on the bed. "There's a pump out back for water. House has the same. No indoor facilities yet, but I've been considering improvements." Sophia stood in the center of the cabin, trying to absorb that this small space was now hers. After the crowded room behind the mercantile that she'd shared with two other shop girls, the privacy felt like unimaginable luxury. "It's perfect," she said sincerely. "Thank you." Nathan shifted uncomfortably under her gratitude. "You'll earn your keep, I've no doubt. Rest today. Tomorrow you can familiarize yourself with the main house. I usually take breakfast at sunrise, dinner at noon, and supper after sundown when work permits." With that, he departed, leaving Sophia to arrange her meager belongings and contemplate the strange turn her life had taken. From respected shopgirl to disgraced outcast to ranch housekeeper in the span of 3 days, surely few women experienced such dramatic reversals of fortune so swiftly. Yet as she carefully folded her mother's shawl and placed it in the drawer alongside her new garments, Sophia felt a cautious optimism taking root. Whatever happened next would be of her own making, not dictated by the narrow-minded judgments of others. That evening, after washing away the dust of travel, Sophia made her way to the main house, determined to at least inspect the kitchen before attempting breakfast the following morning. She found the back door unlocked and stepped into a spacious kitchen dominated by a large cast iron stove and a sturdy wooden table that could easily seat 8. The pantry was reasonably well stocked with staples, though she noted several items that would need replenishing soon. A quick exploration revealed a formal dining room rarely used, a comfortable parlor with bookshelves lining one wall, and a study that clearly served as Nathan's private domain. She was examining the books, an impressive collection for a ranch house, including volumes of history, poetry, and practical farming manuals, when she heard the front door open. Turning guiltily, she found Nathan standing in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I hope you don't mind," she said quickly. "I wanted to familiarize myself with the house before morning." "It's what I hired you for," he replied with a slight nod. Then, noting her interest in the bookshelf, he added, "Feel free to borrow any that interest you. Books should be read, not just displayed." Sophia's fingers traced the spine of a volume of Tennyson's poetry. "You've quite a collection. Did you bring these from your previous home?" A shadow crossed his face. "Some, others I've acquired over the years. Reading passes the winter evenings." He moved to his desk, retrieving a small leather-bound book. "This might be useful," he said, handing it to her. "Mrs. Peterson kept household accounts here. Monthly expenses, supplies needed, wages paid to the hands." Sophia accepted the ledger, recognizing the practical gesture for what it was, entrusting her with the running of his household. "I'll continue it carefully." "I know you will." He hesitated, then added, "There's coffee and biscuits if you're hungry. The men ate earlier." She realized then that she'd been so absorbed in exploring her new domain that she'd forgotten to eat. "Thank you. I should return to my cabin, though it's getting late." Nathan nodded, but seemed reluctant to end the conversation. "I'll be riding out early with the men tomorrow. We're moving some cattle to the lower pasture before winter sets in." "I'll have breakfast ready," she promised. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. "Miss Dalton." She looked back questioningly. "What happened in Kingfisher? It doesn't follow you here." "The broken arrow is a fresh start." The simple statement, delivered in his straightforward manner, touched Sophia deeply. "Thank you, Mr. Xavier. Good night." In the weeks that followed, Sophia settled into the rhythms of ranch life with surprising ease. Rising before dawn to prepare breakfast for Nathan and the hands, spending mornings cleaning and organizing the main house, afternoons cooking, mending and tending the kitchen garden, and evenings catching up on correspondence or balancing accounts. The three permanent ranch hands, Hank, a taciturn old-timer named Pete, and a younger cowboy called Tomas, treated her with respectful courtesy. Grateful for the marked improvement in meals and the comfortable order she brought to the main house, Nathan himself remained something of an enigma. He was unfailingly polite, but maintained a careful distance, often riding out before sunrise and returning after dark. When their paths did cross, their conversations remained largely practical discussions of supplies needed, ranch business, or weather concerns. Yet Sophia often caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice, his expression thoughtful and unguarded in those brief moments before he'd look away. November brought the first serious cold snap, with frost painting the grassland silver each morning. Sophia had just finished hanging the week's laundry indoors to dry by the kitchen stove when she heard horses approaching. Through the window, she saw Nathan and the men returning earlier than usual, their expressions grim. She met them at the back door, concern evident in her face. "What's happened?" "Rustlers," Hank answered grimly, stomping snow from his boots. "Hit the north pasture sometime last night, took nearly 30 head. Nathan's jaw was set in a hard line as he removed his gloves. "Pete, ride into town and inform the sheriff. Tomas, check the western boundary. I want to know if they hit anyone else." The men nodded and departed immediately, leaving Nathan standing in the kitchen, tension radiating from every line of his body. "Can I get you something?" Sophia offered. "Coffee," he nodded distractedly, moving to warm his hands by the stove. She busied herself preparing a fresh pot, stealing glances at his troubled expression. "Will the sheriff be able to help?" she asked, placing a steaming cup before him. Nathan's laugh was short and bitter. "Sheriff Blackwood is more interested in keeping the peace in town than chasing rustlers across open country. But reporting it establishes a pattern if others have been hit too." He took a long swallow of coffee, then set the cup down with more force than necessary. "I should have increased patrols after the Thornton place was hit last month. Got complacent." "You couldn't have known," Sophia said gently. His eyes met hers, frustration evident in their depths. "It's my responsibility to know. Those cattle represent months of work and a significant portion of next year's income." Sophia reached across the table impulsively, her hand covering his. "Then we'll manage with less. The pantry is well stocked and I can stretch supplies further." Nathan looked down at her hand on his expression softening slightly. For a moment, something passed between them, a current of understanding that transcended their formal employer-employee relationship. Then he withdrew his hand carefully. "Thank you, Miss Dalton. But I intend to recover what's mine." "You mean to go after them yourself?" Alarm colored her voice. "First light tomorrow. Hank and I will follow their trail while Pete and Tomas mind the rest of the herd." Sophia felt a cold knot of fear form in her stomach. "Rustlers are dangerous men, Mr. Xavier." "So am I when crossed," he replied, his voice level but carrying a steel edge she'd never heard before. That evening, Sophia prepared extra provisions for Nathan and Hank's journey, her thoughts troubled. In just a few short weeks, the Broken Arrow had become home, its occupants something like family. The thought of Nathan riding into danger left her more distressed than she cared to admit. As she finished packing trail provisions, Nathan appeared in the kitchen doorway, watching her work. "You didn't need to do all this," he said quietly. "If you insist on chasing outlaws, the least I can do is make sure you're well fed while doing so." She tied the final bundle with more force than necessary, betraying her agitation. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Worried about me, Miss Dalton. The ranch needs its owner," she replied primly, avoiding his gaze. "And I'd rather not have to break in a new employer so soon." "I'll be careful," he promised, his tone gentling. "This isn't my first encounter with rustlers." Sophia finally looked up at him, unable to hide her concern. "Please be. We need you to return safely." Something flickered in his eyes at her slip, but he simply nodded. 3 days at most. If we haven't found them by then, we'll return and accept the loss." "See that you do," she said firmly, pushing the provisions toward him. As he gathered the bundles, their fingers brushed briefly, and Sophia felt that same current pass between them, an awareness that seemed to grow stronger each time they were alone together. "Good night, Miss Dalton," he said softly. "Sophia," she corrected impulsively. "After all this time, I think you might call me Sophia." He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Sophia," he repeated, her name sounding different somehow in his deep voice. "Then you must call me Nathan." "Good night, Nathan," she whispered as he turned to leave. "And Godspeed tomorrow." The next 3 days were among the longest of Sophia's life. She threw herself into work, scrubbing floors that didn't need scrubbing, organizing pantry shelves already in perfect order, and baking enough bread and pies to feed an army. Pete and Tomas accepted her nervous energy with good grace, appreciating the results if not fully understanding the cause. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, as Sophia was hanging fresh curtains in the parlor, she heard hoofbeats approaching. Rushing to the window, her heart leaped at the sight of 2 riders approaching Nathan and Hank, both upright in their saddles and apparently unharmed. She met them at the front porch, unable to hide her relief. "You're back." Nathan dismounted stiffly, and she noticed then the crude bandage wrapped around his left forearm, stained with dried blood. "You're hurt," she gasped, stepping forward instinctively. "It's nothing," he dismissed. "Bullet grazed me. We recovered most of the cattle." Hank, looking exhausted but satisfied, offered more details as they entered the house. "Caught up to them near the Kansas line. 4 men driving our herd toward the railhead at Wichita. They scattered when we showed up, but not before one got off a lucky shot." "Lucky would have been between my eyes," Nathan commented dryly. This is just an inconvenience. Let me see it, Sophia insisted, already heading for the kitchen where she kept medical supplies. Sit down and remove your coat. To her surprise, Nathan complied without argument, easing his injured arm from his duster with a barely suppressed wince. Hank excused himself to check on the recovered cattle, leaving them alone in the warm kitchen. Sophia carefully unwrapped the makeshift bandage, revealing an angry furrow across Nathan's forearm. The wound had stopped bleeding but looked inflamed around the edges. "This needs proper cleaning," she murmured, gathering water, soap, and the bottle of whiskey Nathan kept for medicinal purposes. It could fester otherwise. Nathan watched silently as she worked, his eyes never leaving her face as she gently cleaned the wound, her touch light but sure. The whiskey made him hiss when she applied it to the open cut. "Sorry," she whispered, not looking up from her task. "Better this sting than fever later." "I've had worse," he replied, his voice strangely husky. When she had finished bandaging the wound properly, her hands lingered on his arm, suddenly aware of the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers and the intimate nature of their position, her standing between his knees as he sat, their faces closer than they had ever been. "Thank you," he said softly, making no move to withdraw from her touch. Sophia found herself unable to step away, caught in the gravity of his gaze. "You could have been killed," she whispered, the fear she'd suppressed for 3 days finally finding voice. "But I wasn't," he assured her, his uninjured hand coming up to cover hers where it rested on his arm. "I came back, to the ranch, to you." The simple statement hung in the air between them, charged with meaning neither had acknowledged until this moment. "Nathan," she began, uncertain what she meant to say. Before she could continue, the back door banged open as Pete entered, halting abruptly when he saw them. "Sorry, boss, didn't mean to interrupt. Just heard you were back." The moment shattered, Sophia stepped back quickly, busying herself with putting away the medical supplies. "Mr. Xavier needs rest," she announced briskly, "and a proper meal. I'll have supper ready in an hour." Nathan stood, his expression unreadable once more. "Thank you for tending my arm, Miss Dalton." The formal address stung after their brief intimacy, but Sophia merely nodded, not trusting her voice as he left the kitchen with Pete. That night, alone in her cabin, Sophia found sleep elusive. The memory of Nathan's touch, the look in his eyes when he'd said he'd come back to her, the unmistakable shift in their relationship all whirled through her mind, exciting and terrifying in equal measure. She had not come to the Broken Arrow seeking romance. After the humiliation in Kingfisher, she had sworn to protect her heart and reputation with equal vigilance. Yet in the space of a few weeks, Nathan Xavier had somehow breached defenses she hadn't realized were vulnerable. Was she merely grateful to him for rescuing her? Was he simply kind to a woman in need? Or was there something deeper growing between them, something neither had anticipated, but both increasingly found difficult to ignore? Winter descended on the Broken Arrow with a vengeance the following week, bringing howling winds and snow that drifted against the north side of every building. Ranch work slowed to essential tasks, only feeding livestock, breaking ice on water troughs, and making repairs to buildings stressed by the weather. Nathan's wound healed cleanly, though Sophia insisted on changing the bandage daily until new pink skin formed over the bullet's track. These brief, medicinal touches became a ritual neither acknowledged, but both anticipated a permitted intimacy in their otherwise carefully proper interactions. As Christmas approached, Sophia threw herself into preparations, determined to create a proper celebration despite their isolation. She secretly sewed new shirts for each of the ranch hands, fashioning them from fabric ordered from the general store in town during Nathan's last supply run. For Nathan himself, she agonized longer before deciding on a gift both personal and practical, a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue wool that had cost nearly half her saved wages. Working on it by lamplight after her daily duties were complete, she poured her confused emotions into each stitch. 2 days before Christmas, a fierce blizzard swept across the prairie, forcing everyone to remain indoors. By evening, snow had drifted halfway up the doors, and the wind howled like a living creature around the eaves. Sophia was just banking the kitchen fire for the night when a knock at the back door startled her. Opening it revealed Nathan, snow coating his hat and shoulders, a lantern in his gloved hand. "You shouldn't be out in this," she scolded, pulling him inside. "Needed to check the livestock one last time," he explained, stamping snow from his boots. "Thought I'd make sure you were warm enough out here." The concern touched her. "I'm fine. The cabin holds heat well." Nathan nodded but made no move to leave, instead standing awkwardly in her small kitchen, his tall frame seeming to fill the space. "I brought you something," he said finally, producing a small package from inside his coat. "Christmas isn't for 2 more days," Sophia protested weakly, even as she accepted the carefully wrapped parcel. "Consider it an early gift, in case the weather keeps us separated." Curiosity overcoming propriety, Sophia unwrapped the paper to reveal a small leather-bound book of poetry Wordsworth's collected works, the gilt lettering on the spine catching the lamplight. "I noticed you admiring my books," Nathan explained, watching her expression closely. "This one came with the last mail delivery. Thought you might enjoy it during the long evenings." Sophia ran her fingers reverently over the cover, deeply moved by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Thank you." Impulsively, she retrieved her own gift from the trunk where she'd been hiding it. "I suppose turnabout is fair play," she said with a small smile, handing him the wrapped package. Nathan seemed genuinely surprised. "You didn't have to get me anything." "I wanted to," she replied simply. He unwrapped the scarf carefully, his expression softening as he realized what it was. "You made this." At her nod, he ran his fingers over the even stitches. "No one has made me anything by hand since." He trailed off, a shadow of old pain crossing his features. "Since your mother." Sophia guessed gently. Nathan nodded, his throat working as he swallowed some emotion. "Thank you," he said finally, wrapping the scarf around his neck. "It's exactly what I needed." They stood in silence for a moment, the howling wind outside contrasting with the warm intimacy of the small cabin. Something was changing between them, accelerating toward an unknown destination. "I should let you rest," Nathan said at last, though he made no move toward the door. "Would you like some tea before you go?" Sophia offered, reluctant to end their time together. "To warm you for the walk back to the house." He accepted with a grateful nod, and soon they were seated at her small table, steam rising from 2 mugs between them. The domestic scene felt both foreign and strangely familiar, as if they had shared countless such evenings. "May I ask you something personal?" Sophia ventured after they had sat in comfortable silence for several minutes. Nathan's eyebrow quirked upward, but he nodded. "What happened to make you leave your home? Before you became a drover, I mean." For a moment, she thought she'd overstepped. Nathan's expression closed, and he stared into his mug as if the answer might be found in its depths. Just as she was about to apologize for prying, he spoke. "My father was a banker in St. Louis, respected, powerful. He had certain expectations for his son college, a place in the bank, a suitable marriage." The bitterness in his voice when he spoke of these expectations surprised her. "When I was 19, I fell in love with the daughter of one of his clients. She worked as a seamstress, helping support her widowed mother. My father considered her beneath us. Nathan's jaw tightened at the memory. When he discovered our relationship, he threatened to ruin her family if I didn't end it. That's terrible, Sophia whispered. I refused at first. Planned to elope with her. A haunted look entered his eyes. But my father made good on his threat. Her mother lost their home. They were forced to move to a dangerous part of the city. During their first week there, men broke in, robbed them, hurt them both badly. Sophia reached across the table instinctively, covering his hand with hers. You can't blame yourself for your father's cruelty. I blamed myself for not being able to protect her, he corrected quietly, for believing I could stand against my father's power and win. He turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers intertwining. I left the next day, headed west with nothing but anger and guilt for company, found work on a cattle drive, learned to survive, eventually learned to live again. The raw honesty of his confession moved Sophia deeply. And your family? Do you ever speak to them? My father died 3 years ago, left everything to charity rather than to his ungrateful son. He shrugged, though the casual gesture couldn't hide the old hurt. My sister wrote to tell me. She's the only one I still correspond with occasionally. I'm sorry, Sophia said softly, about all of it. Nathan's thumb brushed lightly over her knuckles. Don't be. It shaped me for better or worse, led me here eventually. His eyes held hers meaningfully. To this ranch, this life, this moment. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken feelings. Nathan leaned forward slightly, his intent clear in his eyes. Before he could move further, a violent gust of wind rattled the cabin windows, breaking the spell. He straightened, reluctantly releasing her hand. The storm's worsening, he observed, glancing toward the door. I should get back to the main house before it becomes impossible. Though disappointed, Sophia nodded. Please be careful. Use the rope line between buildings. Nathan rose and donned his coat, wrapping her scarf securely around his neck. At the door, he paused, turning back to her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Merry Christmas, Sophia, he said softly. Merry Christmas, Nathan, she replied, watching as he disappeared into the swirling white darkness. That night, curled beneath her quilts with the new book of poetry beside her, Sophia acknowledged what she had been denying for weeks. She was falling in love with Nathan Xavier. The realization terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Christmas Day dawned clear and blindingly bright, the storm having blown itself out overnight, leaving pristine white drifts sculpted by the wind. Sophia rose early to prepare a special breakfast for the hands and Nathan, carrying covered dishes through the snow-cleared path to the main house. The holiday meal was a festive affair, with the men receiving their new shirts with genuine appreciation. Even taciturn Pete cracked a smile when he tried his on, declaring it the finest shirt a cowhand ever wore. Nathan wore his new scarf throughout the day, its deep blue setting off his eyes in a way that made Sophia's heart skip whenever he looked her way. Something had shifted between them since their conversation in the cabin, a new openness that both exhilarated and frightened her. January brought bitterly cold temperatures, but little new snow. Ranch work continued at its winter pace, feeding livestock, making repairs to equipment, and planning for spring calving. Sophia settled into a comfortable routine, finding unexpected joy in her role as the heart of the household. One particularly cold evening in late January, Nathan invited her to join him in the parlor after supper. I thought we might continue our discussion of Wordsworth, he explained, referencing the literary conversations they had begun sharing over meals. Unless you're too tired. Not at all, Sophia replied, trying to hide her pleasure at the invitation. These quiet evenings had become precious to her, opportunities to share thoughts and experiences beyond the day-to-day running of the ranch. The parlor was warm and inviting, a fire crackling in the stone fireplace. Nathan had placed 2 comfortable chairs near the hearth, with a small table between them holding a pot of coffee and 2 cups. As Sophia settled into her chair, she noticed a newspaper on the side table. "News from town?" she inquired. Nathan's expression tightened slightly. "Yes. Sheriff finally got around to investigating those rustlers we encountered before Christmas. Did they catch them? 2 were arrested in Wichita trying to sell marked cattle. The others are still at large." He frowned at the paper. "There's other news that might interest you more directly." Something in his tone made Sophia tense. "Oh, from Kingfisher." Nathan hesitated, then passed her the newspaper, folded to a small article. "Seems Winston Keller confessed to lying about your situation. Apparently his conscience troubled him after a serious illness nearly took his life." Sophia's hands trembled as she read the brief notice, which obliquely referenced false accusations against a former resident, and noted that the young lady's reputation has been posthumously restored in the community. "Posthumously," she echoed, looking up in confusion. Nathan's mouth quirked in a half-smile. "According to rumors that reached Kingfisher, you perished in a blizzard shortly after leaving town. No one corrected the assumption." "So they think I'm dead," Sophia whispered, struggling to process this information. "And now that they know Winston lied, they're sorry about it." "Are you upset?" Nathan asked carefully. "That they believe you're gone?" Sophia considered the question, searching her heart for the answer. Finally, she shook her head. "No, that life ended for me the day I left. The girl they knew died that day, in a way." She set the newspaper aside firmly. "I've built something new here, something real." Relief showed plainly on Nathan's face. "I'm glad to hear it. I wasn't sure how you'd feel knowing you could return with your name cleared." "Return to Kingfisher?" The idea seemed absurd now. "Why would I go back to a place that cast me out so easily, that only regrets its cruelty because a dying man confessed?" Nathan nodded slowly. "So you're content here, at the Broken Arrow?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words, and Sophia felt the moment's importance. "I'm more than content," she admitted softly. "I'm happy here. Happier than I've been since my parents were alive." Something kindled in Nathan's eyes at her words. He leaned forward, reducing the space between them. "I've been wanting to speak with you about something, Sophia, something important." Her pulse quickened at his serious tone. "Yes, these past months having you here." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "The ranch has changed. Become more than just a place I own and work. It's become a home." "I'm glad I could help make it comfortable," she replied, though she sensed he meant far more. "It's not just the cooking or cleaning," he continued, his voice deepening. "It's your presence, your spirit. The way you face each day with grace and strength, despite everything you've endured." Sophia felt warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the fire. "Nathan, please, let me finish before my courage fails," he interrupted gently. "I never expected to feel this way again after what happened in St. Louis. I built walls around my heart that I thought were impenetrable." He rose from his chair, and to Sophia's astonishment, knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "But you found your way past every defense. I find myself thinking of you constantly, your smile, your voice, the way you hum when you work in the kitchen." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as she realized where his words were leading. "I know this is sudden," Nathan continued, his own voice rough with emotion, "and perhaps improper, given how we met, but life on the frontier has taught me not to waste precious time." He took a deep breath. I love you, Sophia Dalton. I believe I began falling in love with you the moment I saw you holding your head high as you left that church, refusing to be broken by their cruelty. A tear slipped down Sophia's cheek as joy bloomed in her heart. Nathan, I'm asking if you might consider a change in your position here, he pressed on. From housekeeper to wife, partner, the other half of my heart. For a moment, Sophia couldn't speak, overwhelmed by emotions too powerful for words. Then, with a small laugh that was half sob, she squeezed his hands tightly. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I would consider that. I would embrace it with all my heart. Nathan's face transformed with a smile so radiant it took her breath away. Truly. In answer, Sophia leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a gentle, tentative kiss that quickly deepened as Nathan responded with barely restrained passion. When they finally parted, both breathless, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. I promise you, Sophia Dalton, you'll want for nothing as my wife. Not comfort, not respect, and certainly not love. I already have everything I need, she whispered back. I have you. The following Sunday, they drove the wagon to the small church in the nearest town, where the surprised minister performed a simple ceremony with Hank and the storekeeper's wife as witnesses. Sophia wore her mother's shawl over a new dress of deep blue, a wedding gift from Nathan that matched his eyes perfectly. As they exchanged vows, Sophia reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. Cast out from Kingfisher with nothing but her shawl and her dignity, she had found not just shelter but love, respect, and a true partnership with a man who saw her strength rather than her vulnerability. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," he whispered against her lips. Spring came early to the Broken Arrow that year, as if nature itself celebrated their union. Green shoots pushed through the soil, calves wobbled beside their mothers in the pastures, and wildflowers carpeted the prairie in riots of color. Nathan insisted on making improvements to the main house, indoor plumbing being his first priority, followed by fresh paint and new furniture for their shared bedroom. Sophia, in turn, expanded the kitchen garden and started a small orchard, planning for future harvests. By their first anniversary, Sophia had news that brought joyful tears to Nathan's eyes. They would welcome a child by winter's return. As her body changed with the growing life inside her, Nathan's protective tenderness increased, though he was careful to respect her independence and strength. "You're not made of porcelain," he would say when she caught him watching her with concern. "But you are carrying my heart in your hands." Their son, James Thomas Xavier, arrived during the first snowfall of December, a robust, healthy boy with his father's eyes and his mother's determined chin. As Sophia held him to her breast, wrapped in a soft blanket Nathan had ridden 50 miles to purchase from the finest store in Wichita, she felt a circle of love complete itself. "He's perfect," Nathan whispered, sitting beside them on the bed, his arm protectively around Sophia's shoulders. "He is," she agreed, leaning into her husband's embrace. "Our miracle." As James grew from infant to toddler, the Broken Arrow prospered under their joint stewardship. Nathan's cattle business expanded steadily, while Sophia's careful management of the household accounts ensured their profits were wisely invested and saved. 2 years after James's birth, their family expanded again with the arrival of twin daughters Elizabeth Ann and Catherine. Rose double the joy and double the challenges. Nathan hired additional help for the house, insisting Sophia shouldn't exhaust herself, but she remained the heart of their home, teaching the children, maintaining the household, and partnering with Nathan in all aspects of ranch life. Did you ever imagine this? Nathan asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching their children play in the yard, the setting sun painting the prairie gold around them. "That day when you left Kingfisher." Sophia leaned against his shoulder, the old shawl carefully preserved despite its fragile state wrapped around them both against the evening chill. "Never," she admitted. "I was just trying to survive that day. I couldn't see past my fear and humiliation to imagine any kind of future, let alone one filled with such blessings." Nathan pressed a kiss to her temple. "When I saw you walking away from that church, clutching this shawl like it was armor, something in me recognized something in you. A kind of strength that doesn't break, just bends and endures." "It was you who saved me," she reminded him. "No," he disagreed gently. "I offered you an opportunity. You saved yourself by having the courage to take it, to trust a stranger when you had every reason not to trust anyone." Sophia smiled up at the man who had transformed from employer to husband to father of her children, his face more dear to her now than her own reflection. "Perhaps we saved each other." As the children chased fireflies in the gathering dusk, their laughter echoing across the land that was their birthright, Sophia reflected on the strange and beautiful journey that had brought her here. From cast-out shopgirl to beloved wife and mother, mistress of a thriving ranch, respected throughout the county for her kindness and wisdom. "I love you, Nathan Xavier," she whispered, the words as fresh and meaningful as the first time she'd spoken them. "With everything I am and everything I have." His arms tightened around her, his voice rough with emotion. "And I love you, Sophia Xavier, more with each passing day." As darkness fell completely, they called the children in for supper. The family gathering around the large kitchen table Nathan had built when the twins were born. Amid the cheerful chaos of serving food and settling squabbles, Sophia caught her husband's eye across the table and saw in his gaze the same wonder she felt, that from loss and pain could come such abundance, such joy. Later that night, after the children were asleep and they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Nathan traced the line of Sophia's cheek with gentle fingers. "You remember what I said to you that first day?" he asked softly. Sophia nodded, the memory as clear as if it had happened yesterday. "You said I'd want for nothing now. Have I kept that promise?" His question held a hint of vulnerability that still touched her deeply after all these years. In answer, Sophia leaned up to kiss him, pouring all her love and gratitude into the gesture. "That promise and so many more," she whispered against his lips. "You gave me everything I needed: a home, a purpose, a family, but most of all you gave me your heart." "It was always yours," Nathan replied, gathering her closer. "From the moment I saw you standing proud despite your circumstances, refusing to be defined by others' cruelty." As they drifted toward sleep in each other's arms, Sophia's last thought was of the threadbare shawl, now carefully preserved in a cedar chest alongside other family treasures. Once her only possession, it had become a symbol of her journey from despair to hope, from isolation to belonging, from mere survival to a life overflowing with love. Cast out with only her shawl, she had found not just shelter but her true home, not just security but boundless love. And in the years that followed, as their children grew and the broken arrow flourished under their care, Sophia and Nathan Xavier built a legacy of love and resilience that would endure long after the prairie winds had scattered the last threads of a simple woolen shawl that had witnessed the beginning of their extraordinary story.